place. Don't wait.
Norton 360 with LifeLock. Use promo code GET25 to save 25% off your first year and get a free shredder with annual membership. Call now to start your membership or visit lifelock.com/TV.
Next time you're sitting at a traffic light in your city or town, just take a look at the people you can see. Many aren't looking forward as they walk, they're looking down. Just like they're looking down while on planes, at the wheel, at ball games, at home. Our phones have taken over a portion of our lives we didn't know we had to give away. Now, please listen to Edward Snowden from our conversation earlier today when he talks about how vulnerable we are, what our phones give off, what they give away, and what they can tell someone about us.
Listen up!
Hacking has increasingly become what governments consider a legitimate investigative tool. They use the same methods and techniques as criminal hackers. And what this means is they will try to remotely take over your device. Once they do this, by detecting a vulnerability in the software that your device runs, such as Apple's iOS or Microsoft Windows, they can craft a special kind of attack code called an exploit. They then launch this exploit at the vulnerability on your device, which allows them to take total control of that device. Anything you can do on that device, the attacker, in this case the government, can do. They can read your email, they can collect every document, they can look at your contact book, they can turn the location services on, they can see anything that is on that phone instantly and send it back home to the mothership. They can do the same with laptops. The other prong that we forget so frequently is that in many cases they don't need to hack our devices. They can simply ask Google for a copy of our email box because Google saves a copy of that.
What about enabling your microphone camera?
If you can do it, they can do it. It is trivial to remotely turn on your microphone or to activate your camera so long as you have systems level access. If you had hacked someone's device remotely, anything they can do, you can do. They can look up your nose, right? They can record what's in the room. The screen may be off as it's sitting on your desk, but the device is talking all of the time. The question we have to ask is, who is it talking to? Even if your phone is not hacked, right now, you look at it, it's just sitting there on the charger. It is talking tens or hundreds or thousands of times a minute to any number of different companies who have apps installed on your phone. It looks like it's off, it looks like it's just sitting there, but it is constantly chattering.
What about the public attitude held by millions of everyday Americans? All I've got on a computer is pictures of my family, CCTV cameras that are prevalent in a ton of American cities and overseas capitals. Those cameras are your friend if you're innocent and have nothing to hide.
Well, I'd say that's very much what the average Chinese citizen believed, or perhaps even still to this day believes. But we see how these same technologies are being applied to create what they call the social credit system. If any of these family photos, if any of your activities online, if your purchases, if your associations, if your friends are in any way different from what the government or the powers that be of the moment would like them to be, you're no longer able to purchase train tickets. You're no longer able to board an airplane. You may not be able to get a passport. You may not be eligible for a job. You might not be able to work for the government. All of these things are increasingly being created and programmed and decided by algorithms. And those algorithms are fueled by precisely the innocent data that our devices are creating all of the time, constantly, invisibly, quietly, right now. Our devices are casting all of these records that we do not see being created, that in aggregate seem very innocent. You were at Starbucks at this time. You went to the hospital afterwards. You spent a long time at the hospital. After you left the hospital, you made a phone call. You made a phone call to your mother. You talked to her until the middle of the night. The hospital was an oncology clinic. Even if you can't see the content of these communications, the activity records, what the government calls metadata, which they argue they do not need a warrant to collect, tells the whole story. And these activity records are being created and shared and collected and intercepted constantly by companies and governments. And ultimately it means as they sell these, as they trade these, as they make their businesses on the backs of these records, what they are selling is not information. What they're selling is us. They're selling our future. They're selling our past. They are selling our history, our identity, and ultimately, they are stealing our power and making our stories work for them.
What devices do you use in your life now, and have you accepted the notion that you are watched rather constantly?
I try not to make that easy for them. If I get a smartphone and I need to use a phone, I actually open it up before I use it. I perform a kind of surgery on it to physically desolder or sort of melt the metal connections that hold the microphone on the phone. And I physically take this off. I remove the camera for the phone, and then I close it back up. I seal it up. And then if I need to make a phone call, I will attach an external microphone on it. And this is just so if the phone is sitting there and I'm not making a call, it cannot hear me.
One more section of our conversation upcoming. He's already spent 6 years in exile, an American living in Moscow with the Russians monitoring his every move. We'll talk about his dream of coming home to the U.S. Welcome back. Edward Snowden's decision to go public on his once secret work for our government put everything he knew at risk. His life in America, his job, and his personal relationships. Hear now more of our conversation. Where do your parents come down on what you did? In the book, we learn a lot more than we knew about them. They were both, we say this in quotes, deep staters. We learn that they both had varying degrees of security clearances in their lives.
Yeah, I come from a federal family. My father worked for the military. My mother works for the courts. My whole line, going back, has worked in the government service. So I think this was difficult for them. And in fact, one of the things that I will be eternally grateful for is the fact that they still stand by me today and believe that I did the right thing.
You paint a portrait of what some of us knew, and that was that you were a thoroughly American kid in your upbringing. You wake up every day in Russia. You go to sleep every night in Russia. Are you actively seeking to get out? Are you, as has been reported, looking for asylum elsewhere?
Well, this is not an actively seeking. This is not a new thing. And this is important history, especially for those people who don't like me, for those people who doubt me, who have heard terrible things about me. It was never my intention to end up in Russia. I was going to Latin America, and my final destination was hopefully going to be Ecuador. I applied for asylum in 27 different countries around the world, traditional U.S. allies, places like France and Germany, places like Norway, that I felt the U.S. government and the American public could be comfortable that it was fine for a whistleblower to be in. And yet every time one of these governments got close to opening their doors, the phone would ring, and they're in their foreign ministries. And on the other end of the line would be a very senior American official. It was one of two people, then Secretary of State John Kerry, or then Vice President Joe Biden. And they would say, look, we don't care what the law is. We don't care if you can do this or not. We understand that protecting whistleblowers and granting asylum is a matter of human rights, and you could do this if you want to. But if you protect this man, if you let this guy out of Russia, there will be consequences. We're not going to say what they're going to be, but there will be a response. I continue to this day to say, look, If the United States government, if these countries are willing to open the door, that is not a hostile act. That is the act of a friend. If anything, if the United States government is so concerned about Russia, right, shouldn't they be happy for me to leave? And yet we see they're trying so hard to prevent me from leaving. I would ask you, why is that?
I'm guessing Joe Biden is not your candidate for 2020?
Actually, I don't take a position on the 2020 race. Look, it's a difficult position, being in the executive branch. It's a difficult position, being in power, and you have to make unpopular decisions.
What if someone said, help us harden our elections from attack using your skills?
I would volunteer for that instantly. You know, they wouldn't even have to pay me for that. Remember, I volunteered to work for the CIA, for the NSA. When I came forward to reveal mass surveillance, which we need to be clear, the courts have found was in fact unlawful on the part of the government, and one court said likely unconstitutional. So I have no objection to helping the government. I came forward not to burn the NSA down. I came forward to reform it, to help it return to the ideals that we're all supposed to share. So there will never be a question of when my government is ready, when my government wants me to help, I will be there.
Ed Snowden, thank you.
Now he is explaining to us about his patriotic obligations and duties to the government. I have mixed emotions about Eric Snowden because, first of all, whenever you step out of line with the government, knowing that he was being paid substantially, you basically are biting the hand that feeds you. And even though people like Obama, President Obama, clarified that it was just a matter of time before somebody like Eric Snowden or Eric Snowden come forth with this type of information pertaining to artificial intelligence, pertaining to data, pertaining to the devices that have basically taken over our lives now. That it was just a matter of time before somebody like Eric Snowden or Eric Snowden was going to do what Eric Snowden done. So in actuality, there was people in the United States government way before Eric Snowden ever done what he done. They was prepared for somebody like Eric Snowden. You know, as I'm sitting here watching this interview, I question the fact that whether or not Eric Snowden is actually in Russia. He could actually be back here in America disguising himself as being in Russia. We don't know where this interview was actually taken at. We believe that we know where the interview was taken at, but at the same time, if he's got this much heat on him, why would he have even agreed to have done an interview with MSNBC pertaining to an exclusive? And that's maybe irrelevant in the fact that he might be here in America, but then again he may be in Russia, but then again he's liable to be in South America somewhere, or he's liable to be in the spacecraft going around the planet. We don't know, but we do know this. The nature of this interview is based around high-tech artificial intelligence that has in fact invaded our lives in one form or another. And it began in one phase pertaining to radio, TV, satellite, and then it kept going downhill or down the tubes per se to the point of what we actually are holding in our hands today. If the truth be known, this type of technology existed 50 years ago in various forms of governments, regardless whether it was the American government, the Russia government, the Chinese government, the China government, or in other governments. You got to look at the fact pertaining to our Navy, our Air Force, our military in general speaking. They are ahead of the curve, according to my understanding, to the rest of the civilian life, at least 20, 25, 30 years in advance to what we have access to today. In other words, the platforms that you and I are acquainted with today, the United States government had access to, let's say 40 years ago. 40 years ago, they had the same technology, but they was keeping it hidden. They was keeping it reserved. They was keeping it for themselves. And it wasn't until later on that they felt comfortable enough towards releasing that type of material out to the general public. Which brings me to the fact of, okay, if we have what we have today pertaining to our devices that we hold in our hands and that we communicate with each other on a day-to-day level now, how further advanced is the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, the Coast Guard? How further advanced are the governments today above and beyond where we think that we are as a civilian population? How much more do they know? How many more tools do they have in their toolbox or in their closet that we haven't even become, that we haven't even scraped the bottom or the precipice of the surface on? That's my question. There's no telling how far advanced that this intelligence, this artificial intelligence goes. And the things that Eric Snowden was talking about tonight on this interview, I don't doubt for 1 second. Because I have literally seen my phone light up at night in the period of the time that I thought that I was asleep, or should have been asleep. And my whole phone turned either all blue or green, because usually whenever I hook the charger up to it, I turn the face down. I turn the face down. For some reason, that's just the way that I guess I do that, because if something was to spill or if something was to scratch the surface, it'd come near scratching the back of the phone versus the front of the phone. So I take the front of the phone and I turn it down. That way it's more secure, or to me it is. But I have literally seen my phone at night either glow completely green up underneath the surface of the face, or completely blue, or in some other color. And I know whenever it was doing that, because God told me, yep, they're dissecting your phone. They're deciphering it. In other words, whoever's looking at your phone, regardless whether it be your emails, your pictures, your videos, they're actually deciphering it from head to toe. They're going through it. And whatever that's in there, even if it's been taken out, is still in there. In other words, you can take a picture of something and say, you know what, I really don't want that on my phone, and delete that picture. And you think to yourself, well, that picture's gone and it no longer exists. The thing about it is, that picture does exist. That copy of that picture does exist, even though you erased that picture. Especially if you're hooked up to the cloud, because whatever picture that you take, whatever information, it immediately goes to the cloud. That is a computer up above that's storing all your information. And even though you delete it from your phone, doesn't mean that it's been deleted from the satellite. What the satellite does with that information, who knows? That information could be stolen, that information could be sold, that information could be looked upon as being a radical, transparent, I don't know. But the things that Eric Snowden was talking about tonight on this interview, I not only believe, but I would go as far as to say that there are certain things that probably he is not aware of the capability of what these governments can in actuality do pertaining to privacy rights if they want to focus in on a certain particular individual, such as myself, and find out every crook and cranny about my life. Every crook and cranny. And they can do that to a judge, they can do that to a senator, they can do that to a president, they can do that to a preacher, they can do that to a rabbi, they can do that to a teacher, they can do that to a man out here selling poultry, chickens, a farmer, an engineer, an architect, a business consultant.
It's my pleasure, Brian. Thank you for having me.
Edward,
Snowden, a whistleblower, a person that, in his mind's eye, was doing the right thing towards revealing and exposing the information that he's just exposed. Similar towards my civilian duties of me going out and beyond the perimeters of where I should have went towards being a whistleblower and finding out the truth about what in actuality happened in not only Mount Carmel but also in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, that still to this day has yet to meet or fulfill its obligations in the eyes of the general public pertaining to the truth. Kind of like the assassination of JFK. Kind of like the assassination of Martin Luther King. Kind of like other events that has occurred here, not only in America, but throughout the world, that has kept people in cynical darkness of not knowing what actually happened and why it happened. All these things, according to the good book, according to the Bible, will be exposed in the last days. Because we will be judged by every idle word, either by yeas or the nays. And if we think, okay, if we think that this new technology has all of a sudden increased into our lives to the point that now we don't have no privacy, if we think that these things just occurred yesterday or today or within the past 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years, we're only deceiving ourselves. Because the fact of the matter is, we have been analyzed. We have been visited. We are not alone. We are being looked at, listened to. We are under constant surveillance day and night by the evangelical beings. We will be judged according to our actions. We will be judged according to the things that we should have done that we didn't do. We will be judged by the things that we done that we know not to do. These are all in concordances of the Creator, who has monitored our lives ever since the existence of this planet, going all the way back to Adam and Eve and beyond. So if we think that we're getting by cheating, hiding, being deceitful, if we think that our true intent are hidden agendas are not being examined by a higher source, we are only deceiving ourselves. I hope that you understood what I just said. We are only deceiving ourselves. And the reason why I say that is because according to the good book, according to the book of life, the creator of this universe knows us better than we know ourselves. And according to the good book, the creator knows every hair up onto our heads, knows every hair up onto our face, knows every hair up onto our bodies. And he actually knows us better than we know ourselves. You may be asking yourself a question towards wanting to present your question towards me. Well, how do you know this? How do you know that the Creator knows the human anatomy better than we know ourselves? It's simply because the Creator is the one that created the human anatomy. The Creator created everything. The air, the lights, the moon, the stars, the light, the darkness, the oceans, the planetary formant, the cosmos. He created all things. And by us thinking that he don't know who we are and what our true intent is, we are only, I repeat, we are only deceiving ourselves. Once more, I thank you for listening to this program, and we can't repeat it enough here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 32555. We can't repeat it enough. Good luck to each and every one of us, especially those who have the good moral intent towards wanting to do our Heavenly Father's will in these last days. Thanks again, and shalom.
Snowden, the author of the new book called Permanent Record. It goes on sale tomorrow. A final break. We're back after this.
There you got it. It's all in the program board, isn't it?